Ever since the passing of Akira Toriyama, a lot of people have been voicing their disappointment that we aren't going to see his original vision for the post-End of Z era after Dragon Ball Super. While that's definitely true to an extent, that's not entirely true, because we actually do have a manga written and illustrated by Akira Toriyama set after the End of Z that is kind of a semi-sequel to Dragon Ball Z while also not being a sequel. It gets a little confusing, but today I wanted to talk about that story, which is Nekomajin Z. So, to explain what a Nekomajin is, they actually explain this in the first chapter of Nekomajin Z, where they say it's a cat-like creature who can use a bit of magic. There have been 28 Nekomajins discovered in the world. Their origins are not known, but they live quietly and happily in the countryside. Their magic is usually not very impressive, most are actually better skilled in martial arts, and this story is focused on Nekomajin Z. Nekomajin Z has actually been trained by Goku. Later on, you'll see that he was actually trained by Goku while Goku was also training Oob. So this Nekomajin Z gets up to a lot of trouble. The first chapter sees a Saiyan coming to Earth to find a vacation home. And, well, what happens? Nekomajin Z, or he's otherwise known as Z, and his buddy come up with a scheme to dress Nekomajin Z, again, really just Z, as a koala. Then they bring out the camera and say, "You want a picture? That'll be $16 for you and your wife, Lord Unyo." Well, let's just say they pay that price, and as the picture's being taken, Z does something that's really not appropriate. This angers Unyo, and he turns into a Super Saiyan. A fight quickly ensues, and Z is able to access the form of a Super Saiyan, even though he's not a Saiyan himself, and defeats Unyo, sending him back to his home planet. Again, this is kind of a sequel to Dragon Ball Z, but it's also a bit of a gag manga. So the idea of a surviving Saiyan isn't really even touched upon. In the second issue, Unyo comes back to Earth for revenge against Z because he got a divorce from his wife, and he blames Z for basically wrecking his life. He brings with him Kuriza, the son of Frieza. However, most of the issue revolves around a bunch of jokes being told, and by the end of the issue, there's no room left for the actual full-fledged battle to take place between Kuriza and Z, so they plan to reschedule their fight for a later date, and Kuriza and Unyo end up staying with Z until a later date for them to have their fight. Now, you remember whenever I said this was a gag manga and there's some stuff that doesn't make sense? Well, even though this takes place after Dragon Ball Z, we actually have Vegeta coming to Earth under the orders of Lord Frieza. That's right, this is a Vegeta who can turn into a Super Saiyan with Saiyan armor, but he's there as a villain trying to figure out what's going on. Why is Kuriza and Unyo still on the planet? Well, once they tell him that's because Z is so powerful and they want to defeat him but they're having a tough time, Vegeta decides to square off against Z himself. But he ends up basically getting beat, he goes Super Saiyan, and then he has to go because he gets a call and he decides to leave the planet. He ends up saying in the last panel, "I am never going to appear in another gag manga." Boo actually appears in the next chapter, and he's informed that he looks very similar to Z, both in style, tone, and comedic delivery. He's interested in a fight because he hears that Z is powerful. Well, Z's buddy says, "Okay, I'll set you guys up. Whenever I see Z, I'll go ahead and give you a holler." So his buddy comes and sees Z, and then Z is like, "Oh my goodness, I'm going to fight Boo." And then who shows up at this time but a knockoff Nekomajin called Usamajin, which Usa is short for Usagi, a rabbit, so it's basically a rabbit Majin. So they're trying to figure out how to defeat him because he's a bit more powerful than he used to be. So Z ends up in a bit of a pickle, and his buddy calls for Boo. And then his buddy says that, "You want to fight Nekomajin Z, don't you, Boo?" Then, of course, he incorrectly informs him Usamajin is Nekomajin Z, and Boo basically takes him out easily. Then Boo leaves. So that's a big win for Z. And then, of course, the last chapter is the biggest one in which we actually see Goku, Z's master, on a search for him. At first, he wants to see how far along he's come with his training, so they do a little sparring match, and Goku ends up going Super Saiyan. It's actually really, of course, this is Toriyama, so it's a really well done panel, and it's very good action. The energy is great. And of course, we get some comedic stuff as well, like with Z farting in Goku's face to throw him off. And then Goku defeats him with a cat toy and basically distracts him, grabs him, and he wins. So Goku's like, Z, we need your help. I've got Gohan, Goten, Pan, Oob back at my house, and there's this villain, and we're not able to defeat him. Z's like, oh my goodness, not even you or Oob? So Goku's like, it looks like you're the only one who can beat him. Please help us. So Z goes back to the house, and we actually get a really cool panel of Goku, Oob, Chi-Chi, Pan, what looks to be Goten, but he's way too small to be Goten. That's, of course, probably just an error. And then we have the Ox King. No Gohan there, but still, just the idea that Goku mentioned Gohan in this time period is interesting. So they get to the house, and what was it? It was a mouse. And of course, Goku calls Z to handle the mouse. And that was the last chapter of Nekomajin Z. But of course, this is set after the end of Z because, like I said, we already established Goku, Oob, and Pan in this time frame. And Oob has on the traditional Turtle Hermit gi, and Pan has on her regular clothes, and she's a little bit older. She has a more Kid Gohan haircut from the Namek arc of Dragon Ball Z, or the Namek Saga, if you will. So this really shows a passage of time. It's definitely set after the end of Z. Now, don't forget, this is, of course, also a gag manga, so while it also is set after the end of Z, it is also somehow in a universe where Dragon Ball is a manga and an anime, and they sometimes reference it just as a joke. But this is the most we see of Akira Toriyama's post-end of Z era. And I gotta say, it's charming. Again, there's some stuff that doesn't really line up with current canon in Dragon Ball Super. Of course, Toyotaro will have to change a lot of things. But for me, all I really need to see in this time frame is Goku back at his house with Oob, Pan, Goten, and Gohan. I think Dragon Ball Super will probably end up there. I think what will end up happening is Goku goes off to train with Oob for a while, and then he goes back to the regular home of his with Oob. Maybe Oob lives with Goku, and Goku trains Oob, Pan, Gohan, and Goten, and they all have a good time, you know? But yeah, this was basically the most that we are going to sadly ever see of what Akira Toriyama may have intended for the post-end of Z era. Again, this was made years ago, so this is also way before Super. So, like I said, Toyotaro may need to take some liberties whenever he takes a look at this and decides to adapt it for Super. But I think this is roughly what we'll be seeing past the end of Z if they ever do it in Super. Anyways, guys, I just wanted to take this opportunity to let you know about the Nekomajin Z series and what Akira Toriyama did with it with regards to incorporating Dragon Ball and post-end of Z content into it. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment down below, and subscribe for more, and I will see you in the next one. Peace off.